I fired myself effectively as an artist and became a business person. People always ask, like, what happened to your creative feeling and your juice and your passion? And it's like, I just put it into building a business. Instead of building a sculpture, I built a business. And you still have to have those same creative and abstract solutions to the problem that you're building. It's just a different thing you're creating. I ignorantly thought before the sale that I was kind of above that. I was like, this is just my work. It's just my job. It's not part of me, but it does give you a reason to get up every day. And that subtle psychology changes dramatically when you don't have to get up for that thing. I don't know any better problem solvers than artists because they're always out of the box. They just come up with some dumb ass idea that actually work. Art is not engineered for storage.
No.
It's engineered for experience and the conversation and building and changing humanity ultimately. But that's only done through experience.
Welcome to Vita Brevis, a podcast about business, art, life, and death. I'm your host, Carlos Cardenas. Here we explore how business, creativity, and philanthropy intersect through the lives of remarkable people. I talk with entrepreneurs and community leaders who are passionate collectors and visionary patrons to discover how art shapes their work, purpose, and legacy. Because life is short, but art is forever.
Vita Brevis is here to entertain you. Nothing discussed here should be taken as financial, investment, or legal advice. Views expressed are personal and for general discussion only.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to Vita Brevis. Today's guest is a gentleman I've known for close to a decade, Robert Boland. Robert has spent 30 years living and working inside the art world as an art handler, sculptor, commercial photographer, Fulbright Fellow, gallery president, nonprofit art board chair, and art storage handling business owner. And it is this depth of experience, rather than a business school playbook, that made him an entrepreneur. Beginning in 1995, he spent extended periods inside monasteries across the United States, Japan, Thailand, Nepal, and India, studying pilgrimage and ritual. His 2010 Fulbright to Japan followed a specific set of pilgrimages through the famous Shikoku 88 temple pilgrimage. That immersion gave him something rare, the emotional intelligence to understand process and ritual. He took this back and saw what artists, collectors, and institutions actually need, and the patience to build systems worthy of that trust. In 2013, he founded Vault Fine Art Services, channeling 2 decades of hands-on art world relationships into a company built on care, intention, and operational excellence. He went on to serve as the board chair of the entrepreneurs organization Austin Accelerator, mentoring emerging founders with the same philosophy that defines his own work, that the bridge between art and business is not a compromise. It's the most interesting place to build. Robert is just perfect for this show. I hope you enjoy our conversation. You recently sold your business.
Right.
Want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah.
Not the sale necessarily, but just, tell us about Vault Fine Art Service.
Yeah. So Vault Fine Art Services was started 13 years ago by 3 founders and 4 different investors. I came up with the concept, put together a business plan, invited the founders, and then together we went and got the investors working together on board. And so luckily for us, the investors was an easy sell because they needed the services that we wanted to provide. So they're already clients. And so they're clients and investors. And so it's kind of like double dipping for them. So it's better for them. But they got to invest into a small company. I don't think any one of them usually does this industry. But since Austin 13 years ago was a super small town, it's still a small town, but it was a super small town and they needed the services. And so they were like, yes, we're in. And so that got us running. We were able to renovate a building to museum quality storage for humidity, climate, high security, alerts, fire, all this kind of stuff, right? All the necessities that the museums require, which also high-end clients and insurance companies require. And so we started that. In the very beginning, I was working for museums and private clients, and the private clients kept saying, "Okay, I just got this piece from the armory. Unpack it, put it here, take this one down, make a crate, and put it into art storage." And we're like, "We don't have one." So we would always have to drive it to Houston or Dallas. And so that happened enough to clue me into like, okay, there's something here, and let's make it happen.
So it started as an art handling business then.
Yeah, like individuals art handling, and you just kind of like good old boys kind of getting together. Like,
Mhm.
okay, we got this big job. We got to renovate this house. We're not going to renovate it, but we're going to take all the artwork out and we're going to ship it to Dallas or Houston for art storage.
Okay.
And that would stay there for a year. And I started doing the numbers and started thinking about the possibilities of how many clients would this take, how much money would this make. I just kind of build out the projections for that.
Got
And
it.
we're like, yeah, we have something here.
Were you advised by a wealth advisor or a certified exit planner or anything like that?
I was advised by somebody who takes you through the transition of exiting. Yes.
A broker.
Yes.
Okay.
Technically a broker. Yeah.
But that's very different from a tax expert, a
That's
wealth
right.
advisor,
That's right.
things like
That's
that.
right. I had no tax expert and wealth advisor, and I suffered from it from the end.
Tell me
I
about
didn't
that.
know. Well, being raised as an artist, I had no experience with taxing or putting off taxes or how to structure your finances, diversifying portfolios. I never had a portfolio before, and until now, right? So, not knowing that, I don't know how to operate it. I don't know who or what questions to ask or what to do with it, right? And so, when I did get the sale, then I was hit by a huge tax bill. I was like, "Holy crap, that's a lot of money going out the door." And
And
then now talking to a wealth advisor, like, "Yeah, you could have put a percentage of that off until later and still kept some of that to use now."
well, what's kind of unfortunate about this, I mean, I hope there will be multiple exits in your life.
That's the plan.
Yeah. So you'll know better next time.
Exactly
But
right.
once again, going back to listeners here, if you are thinking of exiting your business, you need to start planning years in advance. Even 6 months before, you plan on closing, that might be too late.
Yeah, yeah. So, that kinda goes in tandem with my earlier comment about having a really high moral value, moral
Yeah.
standard.
Hmm.
Um, that moral standard matched with how I ran the business from day one. I wanted to take it out of the good old boy system and then saying, no, this is our process. This is how we do. And this is how we're going to build. And so if you start that from the very beginning or start today and change your ways and just like put, just document it down and build it from there, then the foundation will be set. So when and if that sale does come, you're ready.
I've heard often that exited founders suffer from seller's remorse
Yeah.
for a number of reasons.
Right.
One of them primarily being, more on the psychological side. Like,
Right.
well, I used to have a purpose.
Right.
I just sold my purpose.
Right.
What now? And then you're
Right.
like in this sort of existential limbo.
Totally.
What do you think about that?
I totally went through that.
You did.
Every now and then it comes back. I'm like, oh geez. Yeah, because I was I ignorantly thought before the sale that I was kind of above that. I was like, this is just my work. It's just my job. It's not part of me, but it does give you a reason to get up every day. And that subtle psychology changes dramatically when you don't have to get up for that thing,
Hmm.
right? For that need. For those 12 families that you're supporting, they're all employees. They're no longer your concern, so you don't have to work for them anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that kind of eats away at your purpose.
How
Not
long?
not necessarily like your purpose, grandiose purpose in life, but it eats away at your daily
Yeah.
purpose of why am I
Reason to get out of bed,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah. Luckily, I got out of bed every day.
You went to school as an undergrad studying art, as I
Yeah.
recall.
I got experimental studies in art, and then I went to grad school. I took a 6-year break and then grad school at UT for sculpture. And then after that, trying to make some money because they don't really teach you how to make money.
Of course not.
They teach you how to make art and conceptualize. which is really hard to make money.
Of course.
Conceptualizing.
Yeah, conceptual art
It's-
doesn't pay.
Yeah. Conceptual artists and philosophers hold hands.
Yeah.
As they starve.
And it's a pretty, I don't want to say it's a common route, but I know a lot of people when they finish art school sort of handling friends' art. And it's just a very natural progression,
Yeah.
you know? And what do you need? You need some white gloves, you need a level, you need,
Yeah. You need some tools. You
Yeah.
have to have knowledge of materials
yeah,
and how it's built,
okay.
or the right questions to find out how it's built.
It's still a relatively low barrier to
Yeah.
entry.
Yes, definitely.
So, what made it so that you were able to take a jump saying, hey, this isn't just a temporary thing for me to try to scrape by being an artist, but hey, I'm going to try to build a business.
Right.
What made that change?
There's a lot of different levels that I entered into that decision. One was base levels, like 1 + 1 has to equal 2, because I just had a kid.
Okay.
My wife just had her first kid, and we're like, oh shit, I need to put some food on the table. And so that demand was very real. And just like looking at growing a kid and what the demands for that kid, like college and whatnot, are going to need, it's like, I need to get on this money making. I need to get a job, right? And I always knew that in Austin, you don't get a job, you make your own job. Just because it's so small, it's just so niche. It's just um, the pay is never really good in Austin. Still, it's not that great, and it's really high expense living. And so that was one level. Another level is that coming from the arts, they really do a really good job of teaching you how to solve problems. And so getting outside the box, I don't know any better problem solvers than artists, because they're always out of the box. They just come up with some dumb ass idea that actually work. And so with that frame of mind, I was able to see the issue of not having art storage, and being able to see the current condition of art handling, like this good old boy system, and then being able to level up, like putting those two things together, and also looking at different cities and how they did it and why they did it and when they did it, and just bringing it to Austin.
So was there a lot of like research on your part? Like
Oh,
market
yeah.
research? Oh, you did?
Yeah. So I did a lot of research. I went to Dallas, Houston, New York, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, and visited all these other art handling, art storage facilities. I would call and I would say, "Hey, I've got a client moved into your area. Can I get a tour?" Because not many people in this industry would be able to get a tour of an art storage facility unless
Mhm.
you're kind of in the world, right?
Mhm.
Unless you're a potential client.
Well, there's security issues, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're not going to let any Joe Schmo in there. And so I knew the right words, and I knew how to poise myself to get in the door. And so I got in the door and I started asking questions like, and at one point I was getting so good at the questions, they're like, yeah, you're asking way too good at questions. Like how high the shelves are off the ground, 6 inches for insurance. It's like, my insurance company is very thorough. And so, yeah, so I started doing research. I started putting all this stuff together, started making spreadsheets of what I would need and what the cost would be and how much income it would take to cover those costs, and started putting all those together.
You did a pro forma profit and loss, which you don't learn at art school.
No, you don't. I had no idea. No, when I started, I was like, I got this idea. My wife introduced me to another artist that taught at school about entrepreneurship and artistry.
Oh, cool.
Because I really do think like every artist is an entrepreneur.
Is this at UT?
Yeah, it was at UT.
Who taught that?
Jen Chenoweth.
In the art department?
Yeah. She was not in the art department anymore. I mean, she was kind of floated around. I think she was adjunct. But now I know she works for the city. She's still a really good friend.
Wow.
Yeah, so I met with her.
I didn't know they had that at CalArts.
No,
UT, I mean.
No.
I'm sorry, because I went to CalArts and I remember
Yeah.
there was some class like that. I just remember it was just completely useless.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the hard thing about the university. It's people don't understand the necessity of it, so they just throw it away.
Mhm.
But also in the arts, they don't push the necessity, or they don't describe or explain why it's important.
You're not going to be confronted with that need until you're out of school.
Right.
Then it
Right.
really stares you in the face
Right.
when your wife is pregnant.
But when you're in school, that's the time, because I got real mad at school. I was like, why didn't they teach me how to, because you're going to need to know how to network as an artist. You're going to have, you are.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And you're going to need to know how to market yourself, whatever that means, right? But it's marketing. And you're going to need to know how to work. And you have to know how to work with other people, like employees, if you actually want to grow your stuff, right? And to either, whether it's somebody in the studio, somebody mixing materials, somebody welding something together, or if it's admin or something,
Mhm.
right?
Well, what's interesting, I think this isn't just a problem coming from art school. I mean,
Yeah.
most department. I don't know if you're. I don't know if you're an engineer or a sociologist or
Yeah.
a historian. I mean,
Or a
so many
designer.
fields.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's starting to change, but it's definitely still a problem with education in general.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. So anyhow, going back to the process, so you were doing research, you were putting together spreadsheets, you had some partners at the time,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And I imagine you started talking to these potential investors, and they wanted to see some numbers, some projections, some
Yeah.
possible ROI. How
Right.
do you manage something when your investors are your clients? Because I can imagine somebody saying, "Hey, well, I had already invested in your company, so you know what? You're going to do this job for free."
Right.
How do you handle that?
Um, I it kind of handled itself, because the business people know that the entrepreneur needs to make funds,
Yeah.
and they know that um, there in a small town there's not too many, and so if I pull my funds, then how can that entrepreneur succeed?
Well, their investment is not viable if
Right.
they're not paying for the service. Yeah.
Exactly right. And so the company would still have to spend funds to service those investors, which comes out as a loss. I think the business owners, the investors, know that.
Mhm.
And so that never was really a discussion. Yeah. But what was a discussion was, we would treat them, they were like our number one clients. It's like whenever
Okay.
they called, we were there within 20, we would answer the same day, within 24 hours to a week or whatever. They would be top of the list. They
Got
would
it.
shoot by everybody else.
Got
And
it.
so
Got it.
that part they really liked.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we tried not to do for that for all of our clients, but they were like number one. It's like, oh wait, these people are coming in. All right, all hands on deck. Let's figure this out. All right, this is how we're going to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is completely agnostic in terms of um, the style of the art or the era or anything. I imagine there's some things you can't handle if they're, um, correct me if I'm wrong, like, I don't know, particularly fragile or
Mhm.
particularly volatile in some way.
There's nothing we really didn't. There's nothing we turned down.
Interesting.
Like we would handle. I remember this one is super delicate. Was one was like a hanging sculpture with insects that were taken apart and then put back together into like warriors, and they were having like a air battle around this clod of dirt that was floating, and so it was super delicate. Another was I remember we were doing this house. We were taking all the artwork out of the house, and my partner was he was a ceramicist. He was a tech, and there's a like a china cabinet full of ceramic sculptures. And everybody's like, I think we got all this except for that piece right there, which was a flower coming out, and then the hummingbird nesting out of the flower. But the only thing connecting the flower and the hummingbird was the hummingbird's tongue, which is
Oh my
super,
God.
super thin. We're like, nobody's touching this except for you. And he was like, I got this. And so you have to have the right people knowing the right mediums, like we talked about, and um, how to do it and what materials to do it with, and then how to pack it and how to transport it. So there's a lot of knowledge behind it that people don't really see. And there's another piece that we received and we unpacked, and unfortunately it was a Richter, It was a small Richter, maybe 2 by 3. But as we unwrapped it, the plastic came up with the paint. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Talk about millions of dollars
Yeah, not
down the
cool.
drain real quick.
Thank you for listening to Vita Brevis. If you know someone who would enjoy this conversation, please share it with them. A follow or review also goes a long way in helping us grow. Thank you. And remember, life is short, but art is forever.
It was a small Richter, maybe 2 by 3. But as we unwrapped it, the plastic came up with the paint. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Talk about millions of dollars
Yeah, not
down the
cool.
drain.
Oh my
And so
gosh.
they didn't know the right materials to wrap the piece. And they didn't transport it in climatized. And so it just kind of melted the paint to the plastic. And we started to peel it up. Like, nope, we're not touching that. We're going to take pictures,
Take pictures, call insurance.
document. Yeah.
Oh my
Call
goodness.
everybody.
So you were not liable for that, of
No,
course.
no, because we just received it. And so the transporters or the
What
packers.
happens in a situation like that? I mean, that's a one-of-a-kind painting. It's
Yeah, it's insured value. It's your appraised value. Usually pieces that are high value get appraised,
yeah.
and then they're insured for that appraised value. So if they're not insured for appraised value, then it depends on the piece.
You got to be buttoned up. If you're kind
You
of
gotta-
spending this kind of
Yeah,
money on artwork and accidents happen. Yeah.
all
You
the
know,
time.
all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even on one-of-a-kind pieces. Like I was talking to the museum registrar, and this piece was broken inside the museum, and it was cracked. And it was done by, wasn't an intern, but it was another assistant. And they dropped it like an inch or something, but it had like a hairline fracture on the piece. And the registrar was like, this piece has lasted 250, 100 years until it came to you. You're like, oh my gosh, that's me.
Yeah.
Accidents happen, even the one-of-a-kind pieces. And then you just
Yeah.
figure it out how to either fix it, repair it, or let it go.
What was the most sort of challenging installation that you've ever had to do in someone's home or in a museum for that matter?
Yeah. There's been a lot of challenging ones. We've craned things, marble sculptures over people's houses. It's a lot of fun. Or on the edge of cliffs.
On the edge of cliffs?
Yeah, in town, off the lake. That was a lot of fun.
What, installing work like what, from a boat from the lake? Like,
Well, that's another piece we did. But this piece, we had a crane come in and we did it over the house.
yeah.
And then we had to install on the edge of a cliff that overlooked the lake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so everybody's working on the edge of the cliff, kind of installing this piece. Another one was they moved into a house, and then we delivered this huge Kaneko head in the backyard. It's like a huge 6-foot tall ceramic head. So it's fragile and it's really heavy. And so we put it in the back, we installed it, and then 2 years later, 3 years later, I forget how long, they're moving houses, so they wanted to take the piece, and they built up their house and their yard around it, so we couldn't take it out the same way we brought it in. So we had to bring a boat, like a barge, and which had a crane arm on it, and dock it, and then we had to crane it onto the boat, and then we had to take the barge up with the art piece up the river to another dock and crane it back onto a semi.
Have you had to alter architecture before?
Yes. Oh, all the time.
Oh, really? What,
Oh, yeah,
remove
yeah.
walls and stuff like that?
Walls, windows, door panes, flooring, all of that. Either it's too heavy or too big. One person, we brought the piece in, and then he took away his staircase and made it a spiral staircase. And so it was a piece that was 8 foot by 6 foot. And the only way to take it out was to remove a window and put it out through the window. And so it was second story, third story high. So we had a scissor lift, and we had to have the construction people take out the window, And then we went up on a scissor lift and we handed it down the scissor lift and bring it down and put it in the truck. Put it in the crate and then put it in the truck. Yeah.
I think for a lot of complicated works, at the end of the day, they just end up in storage and stay there.
Sometimes.
Because they're too complicated. I mean, they're almost,
Yeah.
museum grade works. So
Yeah.
they will be seen by the public, when it's installed in a show,
Right.
but otherwise, I don't know if it's up to the collector to decide. But if you have I don't know, like some Damien Hirst that requires formaldehyde and
Or a bloodhead.
yeah,
Yeah.
taxidermized sheep or whatever.
Yeah.
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 Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating the kinds of art, what people think of and put together and what sticks, what doesn't stick. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's fascinating.
It was told to me that, and I thought this was really interesting, that the registrars and the art handlers and the storage people and the insurance company, it's the backbone of this industry.
Oh, yeah.
And it's completely kind of not forgotten or swept under the rug, but this sort of behind the scenes infrastructure is by nature hidden, for the most part.
Yeah.
So I always thought that was pretty interesting that the sort of unsung heroes of all of this are, essentially recent art school grads.
Yeah. Yeah, they really are. They
Yeah.
really are. I mean, they're trained, they're looking for something. It's like, oh, I know how to do that. Oh, I know how to do that. Just like in this business, when I created Vault in 2019, we just kept seeing this need, another need that wasn't being fulfilled in Central Texas. And the industry that you didn't mention, which is also a backbone, is conservators.
Oh, yeah.
And so we had a conservator wing brought on to Vault. And so we had conservators
Oh.
inside of Vault for years.
Oh, interesting.
COVID came, we had to close it down just because museums lost money. So museums were their biggest clients. And so we just couldn't keep it going cash-wise.
Interesting. So I guess there's very few museums that have conservators
Very few.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I imagine MoMA and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I know the Bayer Foundation. Have you been to that one in Basel in Switzerland? It's all visible.
Oh,
I
that's
mean,
beautiful.
glass
That
pane
is
wall.
amazing.
So
Yes.
you'll see people with it looks like Breaking
microscopes.
Bad or something.
Totally.
They got
Yeah.
all the gear on,
Yeah.
hazmat or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating, but it's very scientific looking.
Yeah.
And they're working on a Mondrian or something. You can see them.
Yeah.
And it's
No, because it is scientific.
yeah.
I mean, the molecular structure of paint or glue. Like I was in a conversation with two conservators for at least 2 hours about glue, about the kinds of glue, the molecular structure, what can hold what mediums together, what has no off-gassing, how long it can last, the tensile structure of it, and when the flash point is, and
Oh my gosh.
the hardening. Yeah, it was just
Something about rabbits, right? Rabbit skin glue.
Yeah, rabbit or rice glue or what? Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I have a friend who's a well-known artist in LA, and his day job, so to speak, is he's a conservator.
Oh yeah,
And
Yeah.
it's amazing what he
Mhm.
does. And you go into his workshop, and it's it's not a museum, but it's
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can go in there and kind of oh my God.
yeah. Geek
know.
out on it. Totally,
Oh yeah,
totally.
absolutely.
Yeah.
As you were setting up your business, at what point did you see value in groups like Vistage and EO?
Kind of early on.
Okay.
Because I realized I was reaching a ceiling that nobody around me could help me with the problems I was having. I didn't know anybody that could help me with employee problems, with dealing with partners, dealing with investors, dealing with or reading cash flow, where to get more cash, kind of projections to go out further, to grow bigger than we already are. So all those things was like this cloud and nebulous cloud that founders didn't know about, investors didn't know much about, because it's so intrinsic to the art world, but then also intrinsic to business, just how to run a business, right? A service industry business.
Mm-hmm.
And so service industry is very different than tech or product, right? You have to deal with a lot of people in tech. And so there's a lot of HR, which nobody teaches you in art school. So how do you deal with this in a PC kind of way or with kid gloves, or when to cut somebody loose, or how to cut somebody loose, which is the right way so you don't get bit legally. And so there's all these small little nebulous web of business things that I didn't know about. And so I needed a group. And so I first joined Vistage, found a good group, and then I found EO, which is, I think, a better group. Just because a small little variance of Vistage, you get a group of people, it's like a mastermind, right? You bring a problem to the table, everybody kind of talks about it, hashes it out, asks more questions, teases more information out of you, and tries to problem solve it, which they both do that. What EO does differently is they don't tell you what to do, but they give you experience to share of when they had that problem, what they did. And you can pick and choose, which is a small psychological dramatic shift. It's night and day different, because in Vistage, I would have 12 people telling me what to do. This is what you need to do. You need to do this, and this, and this, and this. And this is how you're going to do it. This is how you should do it. You have 16 people. And what that does is builds a relationship between you, right, of debt. Because they told you to do it. If you don't do it, they're going to be offended. But if you do it and it fails, then they're like, I didn't do it. They back away, right? And so
why you listen to me?
Yeah, it builds up resentment. It builds up this tenuous relationship. But then you have those relationships of 16 people, right? And then each person has a different one, because I'm telling this other person who has a problem what to do, what not to do.
When you get too many different opinions.
Yeah. How many 16 times 16? How many people? That's a lot.
Yeah.
But in EO, if I say, this is my experience, you can do whatever you want. This is my experience. This is how I did it. This is why I did it. Then you can like, oh, I see. This is going to work. This is going to work. And this is going to work. Then I'll take that. And then I can own those decisions instead of you owning those decisions that you gave me. That makes
Interesting.
sense?
Yeah.
It's a weird shuttle shift, but that actually builds relationship instead of tears it down.
Is that a larger group?
EO, it's a large group. It's nonprofit. So in Austin, there's like around 200 people.
Are they different cohorts?
Yes. Inside the 200 group altogether, there's like 8 to 10 person groups. So
And are they
down.
sort of split up by region or by industry? Because I can see value if it's just like, the SaaS cohort, right? And then everybody knows about SaaS. But
Sure.
I can also see the value of somebody bringing in a point of view from a completely different industry.
Yeah.
Somebody comes from the hospitality industry,
Right.
and
Right.
they'll come look at something with fresh eyes. So
Yeah.
I can see the case being made for both circumstances.
Yeah. This group is 200 in town of all different industries. And that's the regional. There's also one in Dallas and Houston and Seattle. In most large cities, they have multiple groups. And so Austin, they have one group. And inside that 200 group, there's smaller groups they called forums for 8 to 10 people. And within those smaller groups, it's industry very varied. And so you do get those different perspectives. So you do get somebody from like that has a great HR background, or somebody more tech savvy, or somebody that's really good in investing, right? And so you get all these people in different industries to help you with your problems. And so it's like a small little family or a cohort that helps brain you, like a personal group to help you do better. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's interesting. I've never been a part of EO. I've been to lots of Vistage meetings, and no, it's interesting. And it's interesting also the idea that to be a lifelong learner. It's not because you have a successful business that you know everything.
So being in the position I was in, the leader of that group, you just naturally feel alone, because you can't talk to employees about your partners. It's hard to talk to your partners about partner issues. It's hard to talk about investors with your partner issues, because you want your investors to believe in you. So you're kind of stuck in the middle. And with this group, there's a lot of people, other people that are in your exact position.
Yeah.
Different industry, different business, but they're in your exact position.
Yeah.
You're like, one thing about these groups, which I thought at first when starting this business, is that I thought it was like our industry is real specific, right? It's a different industry. We're dealing with the arts. We're artists, and we thought we were. I thought we were like a business that was different than all the other businesses, than a tech firm, than a bakery, than a marketing firm, or whatever, right? But then I get into Vistage and EO, and I see that they're all the same. They're all the same because they're all made of people, and people act a certain way because we're all humans. And so no matter what industry it is, you all have the same HR problems. You all have the same cash issues. You have most of the same interpersonal issues within yourself as a leader, but then also interpersonal relationships with your employees because they're all just people. And you have to know how to deal with those people. And that's what brings this community together.
Yeah. It's interesting. This idea that business is ultimately complicated because you're dealing with human beings.
And then here comes AI,
Oh yeah.
right? Yeah.
Well, that's a
Different
big
podcast.
earthquake. Yeah, different podcast. I might have to have that podcast. It's interesting in the art. I discussed it a little bit in the last podcast. We were talking about how it could have an effect on the graphic arts ultimately. Making a logo or
Yeah.
a layout or
Oh.
something like that. I mean, anything that's kind of pixel based, yeah, that's not the greatest position.
Yeah.
But anything that's kind of conceptual based, um, uh, really idea based. I mean, obviously
Mhm.
that it becomes complicated for something like AI to understand. I don't know, irony, humor, all of these sort of things that kind of fill in like the idea side of art, and less about shape and color and
Yeah.
things that can address the history of all humanity and sort of spit something out in a second.
Yeah.
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 I have heard a lot of people say the next phase that we're going through is we're kind of like going through the industrial revolution, but digital or
Sure.
AI.
Mhm.
The people that are going to float to the top are the creatives that are going to be able to problem solve differently, think outside the box, but then also come up with these like conceptual ideas that will really succeed. And then you'll have another layer of people that just know how to work the AI best.
Yeah.
So probably the combination of those two.
Yeah. Well, the first wave of automation that came along was about essentially manufacturing, right?
Mhm.
And that was replaced by different kinds of mechanical automation. And that obviously went after, a sort of people working with their hands,
Mhm.
you know. But now it's, all of the smug office workers over all those years, they're the ones that are going to have to deal
Yeah.
with. It's very, very ironic. On an unrelated note, well, maybe related. So I lived in France for a long time, and there, your butcher shop is just an amazing thing in France,
Yeah.
right? Just
Yeah.
because you can imagine, it's just nothing goes to waste, everything's fresh, everything's grass fed, it's just
Yeah.
unbelievable. And they were going through a crisis because kids didn't want to grow up to become butchers.
Yeah.
They thought it was, I don't know, bloody and gross or
Right.
whatever. But everybody needs their meat,
That's right.
especially in a place like France.
Demand's there.
So what happens is their salaries just skyrocketed,
Oh, wow.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, so we're seeing
Mm.
that now with, the service industry
Mhm.
here, I don't know, electricians, plumbers,
Yeah.
HVAC
Yeah.
technicians. So
Yeah.
I have this thing, we talk about this quite a bit, in the family that the three things that are kind of safe are healthcare, um, the food service industry,
Hmm.
and home services.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if art is a necessity. Uh, if you step back and look at it as problem solving and creative thinking,
Mhm.
that's where I believe it's more relevant to the discussion. It
Yeah.
gets really, really interesting.
Yeah.
A guy like Steve Jobs considered himself an artist,
Yeah. Yeah.
or at the very least a designer.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And when I was building the company, I fired myself effectively as an artist and became a business person. but a lot of my creative juices, people always ask of like, what happened to your creative feeling and your juice and your passion? And it's like, I just put it into building a business. Instead of building a sculpture, I built a business. And you still have to have those same creative and abstract solutions to the problem that you're building. It's just a different thing you're creating.
A key element of this business is trust,
Completely.
right? Um, the industry is based in many parts on this idea of discretion.
Hmm.
You know, I- if you work with any of the auction houses or, private dealers and things like this, I mean, mum is the word, that all information has to remain private
Yeah.
for a number of reasons,
Yeah.
protecting markets,
Hmm.
protecting reputations,
Hmm.
and just a lot of people in this, this, you know, ultra high net worth context or whatever, they just want to be discreet,
All right.
you know. Um, how do you build trust in a business that's just built around secrecy, essentially?
Yeah. Yeah. You have to get those individuals, both employees, investors, partners, and clients, collectors, to be able to trust you, right? And that's the question is, how do you build that trust? Um, I I was raised with a really high moral standard. And so in sticking with that moral standard, I know very little people that have as high a moral standard than I do. And so I think people can see through all the bullshit, and seeing through all that and seeing something good and worthwhile and trustable is a lot easier to trust. And so my answer would be just be your genuine self. But then you question like, is my genuine self trustable? And so really it's what standards you hold yourself to and then what actions you're taking to those standards. Because the times we did things wrong, mistakes happen. Um, Usually I didn't physically do it. Either my team did or the lack of my team not doing something. I always had to own it. And I would go straight to the source, the collector, the owner, the artist. And I would call them up personally and say, this happened 5 minutes ago. And so I had to own up to a lot of things. And then I had to have a solution before I called them. This is what the plan is. This is how we're going to take care of you. This is how we're going to make it right. And so I would give them the bad news and then I would try to repair it by putting the solution forth very upfront. And then I would have to follow through with that in a very timely manner. It's like, I'm not going to, it's like, yeah, we're going to get insurance on that, or we're going to find a conservator for it. And then 3 months later, still not done. No, it'd be done that day, that week, as soon as we can. And we'd be in conversation with everybody involved.
So Yves Bouvier, who became infamous in your industry.
Indeed.
Yeah. Um, why did he get in trouble? Remind us. Remind us. Tell us for the first time, maybe.
Maybe for the first time. There's a couple different things. He's still being taken into court from missing 20 or so, 23 or so Picassos
That are just missing.
that are missing, that were supposed to be
Okay.
in his building or some of his buildings,
Uh-huh.
and they're missing now. Um, Other one is for taking advantage of art deals, charging clients too much for the value of a piece. So buying something for 3 million and then charging the next client for 6 million or 9 million or whatever. So taking a bigger cut.
Well, there's a difference between being a where you sort of mark up something between its purchase price and its selling price, or if you function as an agent in which you get a commission that's
Hmm.
kind of on a sliding scale.
Hmm.
I understand that he did a little bit of both in his transactions.
And unclear about each.
Yeah. So he would make a lot more than the standard, 5, 10% or whatever
Oh,
it
yeah.
was. And he was
Yeah.
getting these massive, massive,
Yeah.
markups because he was telling the Russian guy, yeah, this is 110 million bucks, but,
Yeah.
he, quote unquote, bought it for, 80, just massive, massive spreads.
Yeah.
And I think when he got busted eventually, his client, um, Wasn't it Abramovich, maybe?
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Basically, he heard through another private dealer or advisor, I should say. It's important to have the distinction.
Yeah.
Um, that he basically found out what the spreads were, and he said, "I thought you were just getting a small commission for putting the deal together."
Right.
You know,
Right.
uh,
I mean, that's the gray area of the art market. It's unregulated.
yeah,
So who says he's doing it wrong?
but that might be one of his arguments.
Right.
That he didn't have any clear contracts. Another big problem in the art world, lack of documentation, or like a scope of work and this
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of confusion. Well, are you an agent or are you a dealer?
Right.
By the way, I know like the professional associations, like the Art Advisors Association, whatever it's called, I forget, in New York. They're very clear. You cannot have inventory
Right.
or represent any artworks. You
Right.
have to facilitate transactions and represent
Right.
either a buyer or a seller.
Not both.
Or yourself. Yeah.
Well,
So
that's probably another one of his gray areas. He's like, I was just representing myself.
Yeah.
I just bought it and then I sold it. It was just really quick.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know where that story is right now. They may have settled. I honestly don't know. But I know there were some really, really messed up stories there. But this is interesting. It's unregulated.
Mhm.
It's completely discreet. Everybody's
Mhm.
kind of working in the shadows. And it lends itself to this kind of exploiting a loophole, basically.
Yeah.
The thing that's kind of crazy about this is, as the art handler for these, I mean, I don't know the value of what he was handling, but we're talking Zurich, Singapore, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he had a few of them, right?
Yeah, he had a few of them. Yeah, I forget all of the locations that he had, but he had an empire.
But he, there's an expression that says he knew where the bodies were buried. He knew everything. If
Yeah.
some guy, is, buying a Renoir or something, he'll know it.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's part of the genius of him, that he can retain all that information and the connections and the artwork and who owns the artwork and how it's traveled and who wants what.
well, he's got access to that database.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a situation where, I mean, for me, it's just bald-faced thievery here. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of shameless what happened there.
Yeah, know something, you look it up, and you're like, okay, this person has it. I'm gonna go ask this person, hey, do you want to
There'll probably be a movie made about him at some point. I mean,
I couldn't imagine not.
yeah,
It's
all of
so
the
sexy.
yeah, all of the character, the the French accents and
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
the Russian collector. Yeah, living in
see-
Monaco and
Yeah.
his thing in Sing. Oh yeah, there's gonna be a movie. Maybe we should write it.
There you go.
Interesting. Yeah, and I don't know what his situation is now. That makes me think of another sort of aspect of the art world, and his spaces in Zurich. I know the one in Zurich, and I don't know about the one in Singapore, but it's what we call the Freeport, right?
Mhm. That's right.
So for people that don't know, I mean, why don't you walk us through it? What is a Freeport?
So
exactly?
Freeport is a warehouse, basically. It's like Indiana Jones, right? You go into, it's nothing but crates. You go in there, shelves and shelves of crates, and people send stuff there. When they buy something, they send it there to be tax-free for however long it sits there. And then they're just kind of deferring tax on that piece until they want it somewhere else, and then they have to pay tax on it. Or they can find another loophole.
From what I understand, it's essentially because it's at an airport and it never crosses a border.
That's right.
It just sort of stays in limbo on a border.
That's right.
So you're not paying any sales or import or export tax at all.
That's right. In or out of the country. And so it just stays there and sits there for the lifetime of the piece. Talk about recurring revenue for the storage, right? For the Freeport, from a business perspective. But for the art perspective, it's a way that they can build their collection and save costs on the tax. But then you ask yourself, why do you buy the artwork if you're just going to store it for the rest of its life?
I've heard some crazy things about these places. One I heard is that you can actually reserve a viewing room is pretty classic. I mean, you did that at your place, I imagine.
Totally.
But I understand that you can even have dinner in front of your painting and things like this, and have like a catered,
Totally.
5-star meal or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. How about another thing that I heard that's really interesting is you can get a reproduction made of your work that you can live with.
Yes. That's a great idea.
Oh, it's that hasn't happened?
I don't know too many people that I've done that for clients.
Oh, you have done that.
I've done that for clients so that they can, because you have kids, you have dogs,
Yeah.
you have something pretty delicate. And I was like, I know somebody can remake it, right? Whatever medium it is, and then have it displayed in your place. And they can say, yeah, this is not the real one. And the real one's in storage, but it looks just like this. And then this piece of trash can be trashed up or whatever, if your dog pisses on it or whatever. And then you still have your one that's creating value in storage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's lots of advantages for that. I mean, I've sold works that were in Freeports before, and it's just the craziest thing because, normally you have to deal with the logistics, here you don't. You just have to send an email to whoever's and they're like, okay, and they just shuffle some paperwork around.
Yeah.
Done.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty
No
fascinating.
taxes, no import, no export, nothing.
Yeah. When you buy work, ship it, stays at the airport, stays at the Freeport. If it's crossing state lines, there's taxation
Within the U.S.
within the U.S.
So we were talking about certain, let's call them transactional advantages. We just mentioned the one about the Freeport. There's one that's been increasingly popular with, the advent of private museums.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not a CPA, so this is not tax advice. I'll say that. What are the tax advantages to exhibiting your art publicly?
When you have a piece of art and it's in storage, so like a Freeport, the creation of a private museum. So I'm also not a tax person.
Yeah.
So don't take my advice. Please keep that in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so you can have it in the Freeport, and then once you put it, so I've had some clients ship it from Freeport to our facility, and then they receive a tax bill,
Yeah.
a huge one. And so they all try to get around that, and the one way to get around that is if you gift it to a nonprofit. And so if you create a nonprofit, there's stipulations of that nonprofit of who owns what and where the cash sits and where the ownership sits in that nonprofit.
Well, it'll be an entity outside yourself, so it can be a trust or a nonprofit or
Right.
Yeah.
And then if you do that, then you'll have more access, like physical access, visibility to that artwork. So if you have a building, like a physical building that shows the artwork,
Yeah.
then you can have dinner parties in there. You can actually see the piece. You can tell stories about the piece.
But I think that's one of the stipulations. It has to be publicly exhibited.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The percentage of time exhibited, I don't understand. I don't exactly know.
Well, if you donate something to MoMA, I mean, MoMA famously only exhibits the tip of the iceberg there, know?
Right. Yes, that is a lot more clear than an institution that you created yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So if I, being a billionaire, created another nonprofit institution, right? Do I own 49% of that, 51% of that, or do I own it at all, or do I just run it, or do I just manage it? All that's important in creating those nonprofits. And then once all of those legality things are taken care of, then I can ship it to that institution. And once I have that institution, then the institution do loans, do traveling exhibits. Sometimes those loans are to my house. Sometimes
Loans are to your house.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I might could see the possibilities of how the physicality of the artwork and the experiential nature of the artwork be used that way.
What if the artwork is sold?
I think the funds go to that institution.
Or your trust or whatever it is. Yeah.
Right. For now, for the record, I'm just going to say institution. In that institution, the architecture, that can be set up in so many different ways, right?
Interesting.
Trust, whatever, or gift, or family member or a nonprofit, but it has to have a board. It has to follow all these stipulations.
They're being looked at under a microscope, you
Mhm.
know?
As they should.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
Otherwise, it would just be too easy.
yeah,
Right?
everybody would do it, and then they wouldn't get any taxes from these purchases.
Yeah.
But at the same time, people with money want to keep it, and so they're looking at lobbyists, attorneys, whatever, to figure out ways to keep it,
Mhm,
which they
mhm.
should. It's their money. They should. Why shouldn't they keep it
Yeah, yeah,
to a certain degree?
yeah.
Um, and so in setting up these institutions, um, if you really want to see work and experience work, that's one way to do it. But I think, like from a personal perspective, it's not just the works, but it's the stories that you have with the works of how you got it, how you found it, how you saw it, or how it's become a part of this nonprofit. That's probably the most important thing that people care about. I don't know if they realize it consciously, but if I have a piece here um, that I got from an artist, and the artist had one leg and only 8 apples, right? That's part of a story. And I think it's those stories and those relationships that actually build up the artwork.
Well, artworks without the story are just things.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah,
Uh, I heard something once that I found pretty interesting, that it takes 2 elements to make an artwork. You need an object and you need a story.
yeah,
And the narrative, comes from, the sort of social discourse that sort of surrounds a piece,
yeah,
And so much of the art world is social now, you know? You don't just go and experience art in a vacuum, There's people around, there's a place to be, there's a time to be there,
yeah,
It's sort of really constrained by all kinds of, uh, you know, sort of social parameters that give it meaning and value,
yeah,
you know? And the monetary value, and I've said this before on the podcast, and it's one of my theses, is, the idea that the monetary part is, if it happens, great, that's like the cherry on top, but if you appreciate the object and you have great conversations around it, hey, that's
yeah,
that's, you know, that should be enough,
yeah, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, there's an ongoing argument, is art an investment or a commodity? And I think most people think it's a commodity,
Yeah, yeah,
but
a store of value.
yeah, yeah. And that they want to think of it as an investment, but I think it's just, yeah, stored value.
Well, you
Way
can't
better.
count on that. One thing I always
No,
tell people is it wasn't engineered for that
yeah,
at all.
not at all.
If anything, it was engineered to, either for beauty, whatever that is,
Yeah,
or for, contemplation,
yeah,
and that's its main function, It's not supposed to be an NVIDIA stock, right?
that's right.
You know, so it's and there's certainly ways to make, there is a value there, and that value can appreciate, but it's just really, really complicated, and it's been kind of hard on the art world, and since what, around 2022, 2023, once
Hmm.
interest rates started to go up,
Yeah,
everything took a hit, and the
yeah,
art market is no exception.
yeah,
Um, I want to get your take on that. So there is something of a, let's call it an art recession. It depends on where you're looking.
yeah,
The auction houses have kind of, leveled off in the last year or so, and there've been some phenomenal record results in the last, few cycles. I think emerging galleries, uh, and sort of mid-level galleries are really struggling. You know, um, I don't know. Have you noticed this slowdown in your business?
it has slowed down. So COVID hit us hard, and we've been climbing up. And for the last 3 years, 3 or 4 years, it kind of plateaued. Um, with things happening, like the top line revenue kind of plateaued. The activity and what has been going on. So, like in COVID, we got a lot of shipments into storage, which helped us out, but it was a really shock. But we were seeing our clients taking advantage of the downturn and buying pieces they really loved and that were less expensive than they were a year ago or 2 years ago. And so now I think it's kind of come back up and stabilized. And so I think the blue chip market is stabilized, or actually went down, I think, in 2024, like 12%. And then if I buy something in a local gallery, I don't know if it's going to increase in value or not. It might not just be a commodity. It just might just be an expense. And so
Yeah.
that's a different mindset, buying an expense like a Honda versus a Maserati, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you might have, it depends on the collector too. So some of my favorite collectors, they actually liked spending their money on art that cost less, but they could get to know the artist
Uh-huh.
kind of in their early stages.
Yeah, yeah.
And they kind of invested the time and relationship to help them grow so that their purchases early on could also grow. So this happened with Deborah Roberts, which she's doing amazing work right now. And her clientele was actively involved in getting her to show more places, to have better shows, to get into different collections that would help her reputation, which ultimately helped their investments. And so I think that's a smart way to be a collector. I love grassroots. And so I love supporting the local artists, the local art scene. But even if it's not local, somebody that's underrepresented that has potential, and then helping them grow to their full potential.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting. And it's a very kind of activist way of collecting.
Yeah.
You can almost
Yeah.
think of it in terms of like, I don't know, maybe angel investors like in the
Yes,
tech industry or
100%.
something,
Yeah.
They're called angels for a reason,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
there to help,
That's right.
help support, build, and, the cost is the cost of activism,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And at the other end of the whole system, I guess, or the other, maybe not the polar opposite of that, but you have like, sort of real like, patrons, of art, art news top 200 collectors or whatever. And part of these patrons is like, they're not really expecting returns either because they're really concerned with legacy.
Right.
They want to build a collection and they want their name to sort of, live on and have an influence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Glenn Furman made sure he bought blue chip art. And his idea was that if things go south, they're not going to go to zero.
Yeah.
They might lose 50% of their value,
Right.
and that would be a massive hit, of course.
Yeah.
But they're not going to go to zero.
Yeah.
And he knew that if he didn't buy blue chip art, then he was taking that risk.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know. And different eras, there's kind of a price point where you can sort of say something is like, in a position where it will, be a store of value.
Yeah.
It's hard to say, but that number's maybe above 200K or something like that, and
Yeah.
artists with catalogs and has probably been through a couple of cycles. I spoke to a collector not long ago, kind of ironically, he's actually making he's building out his own private museum.
Cool.
Everything is in storage it's funny, he doesn't know all these people. It's so weird.
Interesting.
And his thing is his storage is in New Jersey. Anyways, and I've seen his collection and it is baller. It is not like
That is pretty nice.
it's world class.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he goes to Basel on it, like Switzerland, like PJ, and
Sure.
all of that stuff. Anyways, but he said something interesting to me once. And I was a little bit shocked. He said art's a ripoff. And I was like, what? And he said, I'll go around an art fair and I'll look around and I'll see, 95, 99% of this is worthless in 20 years. And part of me is like, I don't know if you should be really thinking in those terms if you're going to be coming here, A. And then if this is a real concern of yours, just buy stuff that's more than 20 years old.
Yeah.
Buy blue chip, buy your Ed Ruscha. It's not going to go to zero.
Right. Right.
You know?
My question would be, why are you there? Are you there as an investor or a connoisseur?
Well, there's different kinds of buyers.
Totally, 100%.
We mentioned, angels, patrons, speculators. What really gets me are the speculators who get upset when things don't go their way. I mean,
Right.
dude, it's not supposed to.
Yeah.
You're kind of a VC betting on like the next unicorn SaaS or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, your $10,000 painting didn't go up to, $3 million bucks.
Right.
Did you really think that was going to happen? That says a lot about you, you know?
But also, they're missing the point of buying art because you like it.
Yeah, and have great conversations. We go back to
Yes,
that.
and the
Well,
stories,
it's
yeah.
not engineered for that.
No,
you
it's
know?
not. It's not engineered for storage.
No,
Art is not engineered for storage.
no, no.
It's engineered for experience and the conversation and building and changing humanity, ultimately. But that's only done through experience.
Thank you so much, Robert. That's an excellent place to stop. Wow, I don't think anybody can top that.
That was fun. That was fun.